Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys had a great weekend. This section right here that we're working on now is the classical period, which is from 1750 to 1827. That's wrong on your slide. It should be 1827, and I will update that later. It's the age of reasoning and the age of enlightenment. The general concepts of the classical period is the classical thought. Is the return to Greek, which is the classics. Thought. That's where we get the term classical from. The classical term comes from the Greek, and that was the original education. So we're returning. And during this time, we start to see the rise of women. Women have some social and political power. And as you see, the more we move away from the church, the more we realize that women have brains too. The excesses of the Baroque period is being challenged, you know, replaced by logic, reason, and structure. Think about that. The Baroque period was all about excess, and so the big frilly dresses. Well, this is a time they're not nearly as frilly. You know why? Because it costs more money, and so it's more logical to do. You can have the same thing without all these extra things, and that's where reasoning comes in. Like, why are we doing these things? And the structure, the form of things. Absolutism is challenged. You will see the rule of kings, as you will see during this time period, while we're about 175 years into the slave trade, that people are challenging the rule of kings. Okay. Okay. In the arts, it showed clarity of form. After so many years, we know exactly how to do things. That's where the form makes things simple. That's why simplicity. You have balance. You have so much of one thing, so much other thing that outweighs things. So you have proportional things. Okay. 1969. Famous people. James Watt invents the steam engine. It's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Why is the steam engine important? Makes mass travel much easier. Okay. More background history. 1776, you have the American Revolution. It's when those people who migrated from England overseas come over here and got tired of being ruled by the British government and decided to do their own revolution. During the same time, you have the French Revolution, kind of the same thing. They were tired of the rule of kings. Okay. Thomas Jefferson, a man who owned many slaves and had children with slaves, wrote the Declaration of Independence. Dealt with man's treatment of other men, particularly those who weren't slaves. Foundations of democracy form of government. Okay? That's the foundation of the model of government that we use here now that has actually survived the last 250 something years. Slide 9, slide 10, slide 9, slide 8, slide 9. Okay. Satire. Major literary form of the time. Use of wit, irony, innuendos, and the rising to expose man's wickedness or faults. Okay, also used to expose weakness and connect behavior. Okay, and caused many writers to be imprisoned, obviously, because governments don't want to be talked about. All right. In music, form was the major component. Okay. Form became the most important thing. We've learned how to write things. Okay. And the major form, one of the two major forms of that time is the classical symphony. This is where you see the what we call the orchestra, the symphony. But the symphony is actually a piece of work, a piece of music, and it's a four-movement piece of work. There are four movements. There are four parts to the classical symphony. There is a sonata, which we call the sonata allegro, which is the AABA form. Then you have a slow piece that follows the second one. Then you have a dance piece. Okay? Usually a dance in three. It goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then you always close with some fast showpiece, a rondo, or a sonata. Now, the sonata allegro form, which is the most popular form of the day, which is the AABA, that eventually became the model for modern popular music, is would you have an exposition, which is a repeated section, which is the main theme that is repeated. Then we go to development, you develop something new, which is the new theme. And then you have what we call a recap or a recapitulation, which is a return to the original A theme. This is the AABA. Now, as we had talked about it and other things, a minuet, you have a repeated A section, a repeated B section, and a repeated C section, then to a D section. Okay, so it's A, B, C, C, D, A, B. That's kind of how the form is written, right there form. But that's not that important because we'll get to that later on in other times periods. Okay, the next one is the rondo, which means you have your new A theme, then a B theme, then you go back to the A theme. Then the next new theme is a C, then you go back to the A theme, and then you continue to use letters to progress through the next series. Okay? Other music, the concerto. Yeah, it's concerto. It's a work of art for solo instruments and orchestra. But it's a three movement work. You have the sonata, which is the AABA. Then you have a slow song, and then you have either a rondo or a sonata to finish it out. Okay. Opera. Opera is a large, elaborate production that includes costumes, staging, set design, and actors and actresses. All of the dialogue, all the was spoken between people, are sung. It's also a secular work, meaning it's non-religious. Okay? The libretto. Libretto is the words, the text, modern day. That is the modern day script. That's where all the words are. All the words are written. Okay, it really develops out of the Baroque period and the Baroque work called the oratorio. This has the same form and the same procedures. You have the overture, which is your musical beginning. You have the aria, which is your showpiece. Recitative, which is a speech-like narration. And you have the chorus, and all those parts are repeated over and over again. And then we eventually have the finale. With the opera, we have different forms of opera. We have the opera seria, which is a serious opera, the opera buffa, which is the comic opera. Opera used satire as the basis of many subjects, as we talked about satire earlier, you know, performed where the operas can be comedic or dramatic. Okay, Franz Joseph Haydn is the guy who invented the modern symphony form. Uh, Modern symphony form. He took the symphony and turned it into the form that we know of it as today. He wrote 104 symphonies. You may know that. There may be a question somewhere. 104 symphonies. Okay. He was also a teacher of Mozart and Beethoven. Okay. Mozart, child prodigy, wrote his first piece at age of 4. Commonly, we call it Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Wrote his first symphony at 10. Really made his name as an operatic writer. That's what he made his money as a commercial in commercial music of the day, which is the opera. Some of his famous operas are The Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, The Magic Flute. Still an interesting thought about that. There is a study called the Mozart effect, which actually believes that if you teach your kids to listen to Mozart at a very early age, they'll be smarter. Who knows? All right. And then you have Beethoven. And Beethoven is a transitional composer who wrote 9 symphonies. His first 5 symphonies are what we call classical, and his last 4 are in the Romantic period. He follows the plan of Haydn, but he greatly improved upon it. Okay, as I said earlier, that his last bit of work was Romantic, and recent studies suggest that he may be a biracial man. Just as we get more and more into the history of things, we start to learn different things about it. Okay, now there are some questions attached at the end of this video. Please answer those and send those in within the next 24 hours, and good luck. If I can get this thing stopped, there we go.